Welcome to the Tow.Club Industry Podcast. Thank you all for watching and listening. Many of you know that I often have guests related to roadside and industry safety, and today is no different. I have David Lewis. David, thank you for joining the show.
My pleasure, Art.
Yeah. So David, I know a little bit about you, and we have many shared acquaintances and friends in the industry, but I'd like for you to tell us a little bit about who you are, your history, and your experience in this industry that we all love so much.
Sure, no problem, Art, and thanks for having me today.
Of
As
course.
you said, my name is David Lewis. I hail from Maryland. I've been a volunteer firefighter for 53 years now. I no longer respond on calls now. Age has kind of caught up to me on that. It's a younger person's game, I guess, if you would want to call that. But my passion now is in training as well as in health and safety. So I've had the pleasure of being president of the Maryland State Firefighters Association. I currently serve as Maryland Director to the National Volunteer Fire Council. But more importantly, what brings me here today is I'm also president of the Cumberland Valley Volunteer Firefighters Association, which many people haven't heard of. And I'll kind of explain why. But the Cumberland Valley Volunteer Firefighters Association was formed in 1901, over 100 years ago,
Wow.
primarily because the fire companies that were on the Cumberland Valley Railroad, which ran from Winchester, Virginia to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and transited through portions of Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. Those fire companies got together in order to form common acting practices, common training practices, in order to work better together. And that kind of brought forth association, which is kind of part of our roots that still are around today, that we are more than just a four-state organization, but we are a national, if not international, organization, because we take topics that are of mutual concern to the fire service and other services as well, and we do some work on that. And one of the things that we did is that a little bit over 25 years ago, we noticed a trend in responders killed on America's roadways. And so we formed the Emergency Responder Safety Institute, which more people may be more familiar with, or respondersafety.com, which is part of our website, in order to address that problem, recognizing that it's a shame that nobody at a national level was looking at the hazards and risks that are happening to responders. And when I say responders, I'm talking about fire, EMS, police, towing, public safety patrols, things like that. They're out on America's roadways. And so we actually formed the Emergency Responder Safety Institute, and we currently host two websites. One is respondersafety.com, and the other is our Responder Safety Learning Network, in order to provide free training. And so we've gone after some grant programs and some other funding opportunities in order to provide this stuff, which we provide out there free of charge. I'm currently president of the Cumberland Valley Volunteer Firefighters Association. We have our learning network has more than 150,000 subscribed users, and we span more than 125 countries. We actually have, that's why I said we were actually an international reach with the stuff that we put together.
Well, that's really good. I mean, that's providing safety and training for and not just, Americans, but other countries out there that could use these resources to help perhaps maybe make their roads safer as well. And I do want to remind everybody that's listening that we will have links to the websites and a lot of these resources that Dave is discussing in the video description for you to view and share with your team and so on. Dave, thank you for that. I mean, it's often, a lot of times I have guests on, and in many cases, and not that there's anything wrong with this per se, but in many cases, there is financial benefit or something of interest to them for either a product or a business that they are involved in. And I enjoy this conversation because the tone And some of the items that you're talking about here are resources that are, not putting any money in your pocket, so to speak. They're just sort of generating enhanced safety for people that are doing roadside work, first responders, as you mentioned, fire, police, towing. Obviously, me coming from the towing industry, much of what I hear about and much of what is discussed in our domain is related to towing operators getting hit. But I think the listeners know, and hopefully they are reminded by this conversation, that it's not just towing, it's fire, it's police, it's road workers, it's people that are paving the roads, it's everybody that's working out on the roadway could potentially benefit from some of the resources that your organizations that you're involved with are providing. I did want to ask, because I've had some guests on in the past, such as the people at Haas Alert, for example. But along those lines, is there anything particularly innovative that you're excited about that you think is going to have a big impact on responder safety, perhaps from a technology perspective? That's often what we discuss at Tow.Club because we're a software outfit. So I'm just curious to see what you had in mind with respect to that.
Sure. Yeah, well, I think primarily, and it's not from a product standpoint, but the fact that I believe in the last 5 years, maybe even 10 years, the synergy that's kind of come together by the multiple disciplines, that we remember that we can't, we're not alone out there on the roadway, and so, when the fire department comes in or the police department comes in and then the tow operators come in, if we stay in our lane and we just do our job and we don't help the other jobs,
Right.
we're doing a disservice to each other. And I think, in the last 5 and even maybe 10 years, there's been a lot more partnership in working these things together. From technology, I think, technology is moving faster than any of us could even think. It's probably moving faster than the speed of light. Um, but I think there are a lot of, I think a lot of the I would like to think that the design of the motor vehicles is probably more, and with the when you look at the design of the vehicles with the alerting systems that are in there, the assisted drivers, the lane assistance, the braking, the things like that, I think are hopefully making it safer for the motorists. And if we make it safer for them, then hopefully for us. I think the one area that we're struggling to address is the whole concept of slow down, move over.
Right.
And that's the scary thing. Although move over laws exist in every state plus the District of Columbia, it's a national problem. When I get out and in these different forums, um, such as the tow show, I was in the Baltimore Tow Show in November. We had a lot of conversations about that, and I know Todd Lease from our group, as well as Tim
Yep.
Heroes, is trying to launch an effort to say, how do we improve the message for slow down, move over? At least, give us a chance to do our job out there, whether it's fire, police, tow operator, whoever it is, give us a chance to do our job and do it safely. So, but I think that, the technologies that's being built into the vehicles in terms of the assistance to drivers and things like that are helping us and helping them.
Yeah, I don't disagree, and I'll just share a personal sort of anecdote with respect to that. I drive a vehicle that has advanced driver assistance features, and I hate to admit that I've been distracted while driving, but I'm going to admit it. And at least on 2 occasions in the past 5 or 6 years, it has saved me from a vehicle collision. So I'm hoping that we start to see statistics that confirm that, hey, yes, these features are in fact improving road safety, and maybe statistics like accidents per miles driven in the aggregate as a country, let's say, or globally. Hopefully, we can see statistics that indicate, like, yes, these features are reducing the, even if it's just rear end accidents, right? Because that's where a lot of the distracted those are the type of collisions that distracted driving often lead to. So I'll just attest to that personally. I mean, they have saved me from a collision on a few occasions. um And, I think you and I both know that we oftentimes, maybe tongue in cheek a little bit, but we always say, oh, hey, this younger generation is way too distracted in the car. But, I think the facts probably, bear that out. And hopefully, cars and these ADAS systems continue to get better and lead to safer roads. That leads me to kind of something I wanted to also ask you here is I know, you've been doing this for some time. And so in the scope of your career, you know, I've been doing this for some time as well, but perhaps not in the same domain as you. And I wanted to ask, how has either the industry evolved in terms of, hey, what kind of equipment do we see out on the roads now that maybe have really changed, uh, for example, the way ambulances and first responder vehicles are equipped, uh, the tools that are on these vehicles. How do you think that's sort of changed the way that safety is going and the way road workers treat their responsibilities out on the roadway? How do you think that's what if you can point to like maybe a few items that you think have made the biggest difference?
Sure, sure. I think, I think there are probably a few items there. Obviously, one of it is lighting that's been both a blessing and a curse. Uh, um, Lighting so that we're seen is certainly to our advantage, but lighting to the point that we blind the oncoming traffic is a curse too. So we have to be a little bit discriminate in the lighting. But I think the lighting and being seen is very there. Um, a lot of the newer vehicles are, coming equipped now with aero boards and signboards and things like that. So those are beneficial. And I think, you mentioned the Haas alert. There are a number of jurisdictions, both fire, EMS, police, tow operators that are investing in the Haas alert. And so, all the newer vehicles obviously have that, messaging capability in the vehicle, and we're hoping that those technologies kind of make a push forward. Right now, I would say it's still in the early stages. Uh,
Yeah. No, I agree. I think we are in the infancy stages, and if you and I've had guests on, and we've discussed this ad nauseum, but if you look at just the advancement in passenger vehicles, like you mentioned, the driver assistance systems, but also the way that these vehicles are connected to the internet, I think a lot of people don't realize the possibilities that just the fact that these things have I'll call it a modem. I'm sure there's a better term for it, but they are connected. They're very connected, these modern vehicles, whether they're internal combustion engine and or electric or hybrid. All three types of fuel power for these vehicles, all of those vehicles nowadays, particularly in the last, what do you think, 5 to 8 years or so, they're very connected. So
right.
we are in the infancy stages, I believe, just my opinion, of the possibilities of how we can improve not only road safety, but driver assistance and so on and so forth. So it's an interesting thing. I'd like to, and I'm kind of excited to see how much better we can get in terms of our batting average with respect to the roadside safety of workers, first responders, etc. And I'm hoping that the OEMs that are producing vehicles continue to go down and explore the possibilities of, hey, how can we integrate this sort of connected nature of today's automobile with roadside safety, with police, with fire. You mentioned Haas Alert. I think it would be really amazing, and I don't know this for a fact, so I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I think the integration of Haas Alert with these modern vehicles will potentially provide uh, outfits like that the benefits of that connected nature with the modern automobile.
Yeah, and those technologies are, I mean, they're pretty well developed. They're just not fully implemented yet.
Correct.
The whole responder to responder, responder to vehicle, vehicle to vehicle, and people, they're actually there. People don't they're there and people don't realize they're there, but they are. But
Right,
you drive down the road and the light comes on your mirror because there's an approaching vehicle coming up
right.
to your blind spot. Or I rented a car 3 or 4 years ago, and I was going down an interstate or something like that. And next, the vehicle started slowing down, and I realized what it was. It was that automatic braking because I was approaching traffic that was ahead of me that was
Got it.
moving slower. And so
Yeah,
so it's kind of there and you don't there. The frightening thing though is that people are too lax. They're too confident in the systems,
I
and
agree.
they have to realize that there are 6 levels of automation, and
That's
really
right.
for the most part, the older vehicles obviously are zero with nothing into it. Most
Yeah,
of the newer vehicles that we have are at level one. It's not until you get to say the Tesla that you're at level two, and
correct.
that's still just it still expects the driver to be there, the driver to be in control.
Right.
We've all seen the YouTube videos and the other things where the driver's taking a nap or eating lunch or shaving or whatever it is
Yeah,
going down the road, and that's not a level two vehicle. Yeah,
it's scary,
level two
actually.
vehicle still in it, still requires the driver to be able to take over and control.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's changing rapidly, and that kind of is the perfect segue, Dave, into this next topic. And I'll reserve my comments. I want to hear what you have to say first, but I have just the prelude to this is like I have thousands of miles with utilizing the full self-driving software that Tesla has. So I certainly have some experiences and opinions on it. However, I do want to get your perspective because this is another sort of item that is really that kind of brushes up against the kind of work you're doing because with respect to these automated vehicles I want to know semi and fully autonomous obviously are two terms that are often used, but many of these vehicles are on the road. I happen to use one that is close to being fully autonomous. What is your overall sense of what kind of impact or detriment you think they will have on roadside safety? I know we talked about it a little bit, but I'd like to hear what you have to say in terms of, let's say, like the full self-driving package from Tesla. How much have you drilled down into this?
Not a whole lot with Tesla, but again, I had an opportunity 2 years ago. I was at a fire department safety conference in Phoenix, and I had an opportunity to ride in Waymo several times there,
Yeah.
which is fully automated. Except I guess you call that a level four because it's still restricted to a geo-fenced area, but
Yes.
because it's using the GPS coordinates of where it can go and has all that. But I was a little bit leery when I first got in one, but after I rode in one actually 3 or 4 times while I was in Phoenix for that week, I was actually very comfortable with it, and I actually felt like this thing's probably safer than having a human making the decisions because the computer is. I mean, there was
I
even one
agree.
point we're going down the road and the vehicle started to brake and it really didn't realize it, but there was a pedestrian on the sidewalk and he was facing the way that looked like he may have been going to step into the roadway. And it turned out he didn't, but the vehicle slowed down because the vehicle had that sensing that there's a human being there or an object there that's moving into my path. I need to slow down. So I think that technology is actually pretty promising. A lot of people would say, "Oh no way, never." But I felt like after riding into Waymo that I was probably safer in that vehicle than if I had been in an Uber.
Right. Yeah.
Some of
Yeah.
the Uber drivers.
Oh yeah, no, I don't blame you. And just for everybody listening, I'll share my experiences with Waymo. My wife and I took my wife to San Francisco, which is about a half, 30, 45 minutes up the road here. And uh, you know, dining and restaurant life is pretty good there. So we went and hung out and we took 3 Waymo rides. Um and I was excited because I didn't have any experience with full self driving sort of autonomous vehicles outside of Tesla. So I said, let me see what this is really about. And we took 3 rides and I was blown away. I thought it was great. Um I at the time we took Waymo, I had not yet gotten this is some time ago, but I had not yet gotten the full self-driving package yet on my vehicle. So I had a reference point. And then when I got the full self-driving package on my vehicle, I noticed a few differences. But I'll share my experience with full self-driving. I think it's probably 99% there. I probably got about 5,000 miles of hands-free and foot on the floor driving experiences with this software package. I'm particularly very impressed with it, and I agree with your assessment. I know we this is somewhat tongue in cheek just from my perspective, but I believe, as confident as I am in my own ability to drive, I believe that in the aggregate, that they've gotten this software down to a point where I believe it's safer in the aggregate than most humans. When you consider the amount of distractions that are a part of our daily life now, when you consider, um, I'll just say the lack of quality control at the Department of Motor Vehicles in most states in terms of how they can judge and administer driving acumen and how that relates to whether or not someone gets a driver's license or not. I think those are some things that really need to be explored at the state levels. Because again, if we're saying roadside safety, we can talk about technology and we can talk about everything that's available. And you can certainly attest to what's required in terms of a training perspective for first responders and how they can increase their chances of not getting hurt or killed on the roadway. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the Department of Motor Vehicles holds a lot of cards in this process. I mean, they really determine who gets to drive on our roads and who doesn't. So I'd like to see, I'd like to see some improvements with respect to how the DMVs for each respective state are administering these things. But I believe that in the aggregate, thus far, places like Waymo, there's Waymo in terms of the leaders of this technology, and I could omit or maybe add one that doesn't entirely have merit here, but I believe it's Waymo. I believe it's Zoox is another company out there that's making really significant headways in this domain, and Tesla. I could be missing a few others. I think Cruise was there. Cruise was a GM affiliate. They had some struggles, but there are some people doing good work in this space, and I really hope and believe that these technology outfits that are trying to make these software packages, I hope that it does lead to safer roads. And I hope that it does lead to, statistically speaking, less roadside workers, first responders, tow truck outfits. I hope it leads to a reduction in incidents because ultimately that's the goal. And I do realize that at the same time, there's a big financial windfall for these companies. So for them to advance their cause, they are certainly looking for revenue and a financial windfall as a result. However, I think one of the benefits will be safety. And I'm sure the insurance companies are all for this. They have to pay out huge sums of money when somebody is injured or killed as a result of one of these safety incidents that goes sideways. So I'm really hopeful for that. Did you have any other thoughts on that?
No, that's still, I'm also interested at what point that they're implemented in vehicles and they can't be turned off. Because right now, the vehicle operator has the right to turn those features off. And,
Right.
some people that are leery of the technology
Sure.
choose to turn them off as opposed to leave them
Sure.
on. But, you know, I just think about, when I first started driving, I don't want to say seat belts were an option, but they was to wear them was an option.
Sure.
And I could tell you when my son was younger, every time we got in the vehicle, I'd tell him to buckle up. And it wasn't too long before every time we got in the vehicle, he'd say, "Daddy, buckle up."
Yeah.
And so it actually became more of a habit to me than probably what it was before, because at some point, which of course was just a lap belt, it wasn't a shoulder belt back then.
Right.
I'm that old, that there. And so some of the things there are you know have caught place, and hopefully some more of these technologies will catch place. So,
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to that as well. David, I really appreciate you joining us. This has been a very sort of illuminating conversation concerning safety. I wanted to ask, you know, in closing, like, is there anything that else that you would like to talk about in or around this space before we sign off here, in terms of things you have in the works or things that are adjacent to the industry that you think are helpful for people to know?
Well, I'd certainly encourage the people from the tow industry to take advantage of the training too. I didn't mention it earlier, but you know what's a firefighter doing on a tow club podcast? Yeah,
Sure.
but when we started this about 25 years ago, obviously we our main thrust was looking at fire and EMS, and we started collecting the statistics because nobody else nationally was collecting the statistics. And if you look at a chart today that Federal Highway puts out, it's the responder safety statistics that they use. They come to us for statistics because we're the only ones actually collecting the statistics. So we look at from what we call emergency responder, and that's not road workers. That's responders, which is fire, EMS, police, tow operators, safety patrols, things like that. We're in the 40 to 50 each year, and about 5 years ago, and again, it might have been a little longer than that, we realized, okay, we're really doing well in this fire and EMS. We've actually reduced the numbers in the 25 years of fire and EMS through training, through better equipment, safety vests, lighting, training, all those things like that. But we looked at who else do we need to help? And that's when we kind of got involved with the tow industry. Like I said, for the past 3 years, I've personally had a chance to go to the Baltimore Tow Show. We set up a booth there. We talked to a lot of tow operators. We provide them some information. We give them access to our training, our online training, as well as deliver to them personal training, if necessary. Because when we look at, we closed out 2024 with 46 emergency responders killed on America's roadways, and 12 of them were tow operators, which actually is a reduction from the year before, which was 20. So is that good luck, or does that mean that we're making a difference? And I hope we're making a difference.
I'd
But
like to think that as well.
we're all in this together, and
Yeah.
a good friend of mine and friend of yours, John DeWeese, is kind of help bridge that link, if you will, between what we do as fire and EMS personnel and the tow industry. And he's opened some doors for us, and we hope that we're making a difference.
Yeah. No, I think that, in the aggregate, I'm hoping that we see this. And if we saw it year over year, the last year or perhaps two, then I mean, the only conclusion we can draw is all the hard work that everybody's doing is actually making a difference. And if we combine that with some of the things that we talked about in terms of passenger vehicles and modern passenger vehicles and how, so I'm grateful for what you're doing, and to the tow operators and tow companies that are listening, as David mentioned, yes, learn about things that are beyond the scope of towing because it brushes up against our industry, and we need to have more foresight to learn about, for example, some of the things David's talking about, regardless of whether or not a tow operator has to perform the functions of certain first responders. We should learn about the safety aspect of what they're doing because we are oftentimes working together on accident or recovery scenes. And hey, we all, I should say, excuse me, are in this together. And I'd like for the towing industry to pay more attention to some of the things that you've brought up. David, I've taken a lot of your time. I thank you so much for joining us. And I did want to leave the towing industry with my message. If you aren't willing to know, please don't tow. Thanks so much, David.
Thanks, Art.
I appreciate it. Thanks again for coming on.